emissions having a global impact?
Human-created carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is undoubtedly causing the Earth to warm up. We have lots of evidence now, both since dating back to the 1950s, Charles Keeling and his famous work on the Hawaiian Islands, recording actual atmospheric carbon levels, and then we use Antarctic ice and the bubbles of atmospheric gas trapped in those bubbles. We can go back about 600,000 years and look at the natural cycles of warming and cooling of the Earth, and in the context of those natural cycles, we can see that human-created carbon dioxide is undoubtedly causing the Earth to heat up.
Okay, and do you have any ideas of how carbon emissions could be monitored or regulated?
We can monitor carbon emissions based on the amount of fuel burned, so that we don't have to try to monitor the amount of carbon dioxide actually being emitted into the atmosphere. Although you can do that, you can read. What Keeling has done over the years is to read parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that is a continuous, meticulously gathered record taken on the top of Mauna Loa, I think, is where the monitoring station is. But the way that we monitor carbon emissions at factories and power plants or in automobiles is simply by looking at the amount of fuel consumed. And then just based on stoichiometry, if you put this much of a particular octane gasoline into an engine and you completely combust it, then you get this much carbon dioxide coming out. So it's basically a simple freshman chemistry exercise to figure out how much carbon dioxide is being put into the atmosphere.
Okay, great. And what are some ways that carbon emissions could be offset or minimized, if that is your goal?
Well, let me expand the parameters a little bit and talk about cap and trade. So some of the most appealing ways to limit carbon emissions are with there's the whole idea of direct carbon taxing, where all corporations would be taxed on the amount of carbon emitted on a simple formulaic basis. If you emit this amount, these many tons of carbon, you pay this amount in taxes. So corporations have an incentive to reduce their carbon outputs. On the other hand, another way you can do a really appealing approach that the European Union has tried out, and that coalitions of states have tried out as well, is what's called cap and trade, where the EPA or some other agency would decide what is a reasonable amount of carbon to be emitted within a specific geographic area, and then that amount of carbon gets divided up among the primary stakeholders the primary emitters of carbon, and each one of those stakeholders then essentially gets a license to emit a certain amount of carbon. Well, at the end of the 12-month period of time, if they haven't emitted all the carbon that they were licensed to emit, they can sell that license to another corporation on a market system, and the incentive the other corporations have for buying the license to produce carbon, the incentive they have is that if they go over their cap, and they can't purchase a license to emit that extra carbon, then they're going to have to pay a fine of some sort, and the fine would be more than it would cost them to buy the license to pollute. So everybody has an incentive to reduce their carbon output.
So where does the taxes go to? Like, how is the carbon offset?
Well, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't really respond to that aspect. So nowadays, oftentimes airlines will offer you the opportunity when you get onto an airplane for $50 or $60. You can offset your carbon by paying some third party to go plant trees in some part of the world. So that's a great example of a carbon offset. But the most appealing strategies to me, if there's any kind of an energy tax, whether it's an individual energy tax on your automobile through the gas pump, or whether it's a cap and trade system where the federal government is receiving income based on the cap and trade system or some other governmental agency, what would be wonderful would be to see 100% of that money going into mass transportation, for example, or into grants to industries to make their industries more efficient, or biofuels research, or you name it, installing solar panels. but this is why I think there's a need for governmental intervention, is so that the taxes can be put in place that are appropriate, that the money from those taxes can be used to further advance the cause of reducing our carbon output.
Great. Arny, what is STEM integration? What does it mean to you?
I wish there was a simple answer to what STEM integration meant, but I don't think there is. And I think part of what public education in the United States is faced with is trying to, number one, figure out what in the heck that means, and then finding useful ways to do it. And when I say useful ways, ways that improve our students' understanding of math and science and technology and engineering, ways that might actually steer more young people towards those types of careers, ways that create a more STEM literate citizenry, so that we can make good decisions on a societal basis for how we want to go forward, particularly related to issues like the environment and global climate change. STEM integration is trying to teach math, science, technology, and engineering in a more integrated fashion, in the simplest terms.
Okay, great. And do you know of any evidence or have personally experienced benefits to STEM integration that outweigh traditional discrete math and science classes?
This is just my own personal opinion, because I teach engineering. And so I would argue for strong content-based courses where students learn science as science, students learn math as math, and so on, learn technology for the technology skills involved. And then where additional courses like engineering bring those things together. I think those efforts to try to teach science through math, or math through science, or science through engineering, or math through engineering, I think that those efforts are typically not very effective. So I'm all for, my idea of integration is that you teach the individual subject separately, and then you give students course offerings that allow them to bring those content areas together.
Okay, what do you think are some good examples of STEM integration strategies?
Well, I think that high schools that have strong programs in the math and science and technology areas, and that add engineering to their curriculum, I think the real promise of engineering as a high school content area is that it is the perfect place to integrate. But then I would also suggest that environmental science is a great place to integrate. So you can see I'm really biased. I am not in favor of trying to create integrated STEM classes that supplant the pure science, pure math, pure technology-based courses. I think they need to stay in place, and where schools and districts can really get some traction around real-world problem solving, those aspects of interest and identity to bring more young people into the STEM pipeline, is by adding courses to the curriculum that integrate the STEM subjects.
Okay, do you think that future classes in secondary and higher education courses will be integrated? Why or why not?
Well, I think that high schools, ironically, are more flexible than colleges and universities. And I think at colleges and universities, where you've got departmental silos and you've got university professors who have dedicated their lives to specific content areas, I think it'll be really tough to break down those types of barriers and those types of content area specific thinking. So I think there may actually be more opportunities for integration at the high school level. However, when you look at a program like you teach at the University of Texas and at other institutions across the country, there are some really hopeful signs that integration is going on.
Great, thank you so much for your time. I sure appreciate it.